Good evening and welcome to the Select Board meeting for May 26th. It is 6:33. Apologize for the slight delay. And I'll do a brief roll call this evening. I am here myself, Deirdre Parati.
Finn Sprague.
Peter Clay.
And I believe Ben Timon will be joining us shortly. First on the agenda, we do have public comment. If there is anyone who would like to make a comment, we have 10 minutes available, 2 minutes per person. Please come to the microphone or raise your hand if you are on Zoom.
No one on Zoom.
No one?
Yep.
Okay. All right, we will proceed. Steve is not here yet, so we'll go down. Oh, there's Steve, but I'll start with a very brief chair's report. And I just want to thank everyone that participated yesterday. We had a wonderful Memorial Day ceremony. The weather did not cooperate, so unfortunately there was not a parade. However, there was a lovely service at First Church Wenham. And I want to thank Dean Peterson and Bill Wilson for organizing, as always, a wonderful event. It was a very gracious and just wonderful tribute. It was a pleasure to be there and be a part of it. Wonderful to see our public safety there with all their dress uniforms, Boys and Girl Scouts. It was a terrific, terrific event. So, and thank you to all of the public who came and joined us as well. All right, I'll go to my colleagues first. Peter, anything?
I would
Good.
just say that actually having it in First Church was actually better than moving us all around. That's all. So.
People did comment that it was easier to hear all of the speakers. The audio was easier to manage indoors. Yeah. Finn?
No, I don't have any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Steve?
Yeah,
Back to you.
Thank you. Sorry, it was a little late. So a couple things tonight. First is Mass General Law and the Department of Revenue regulations require that the Board of Assessors make an attempt to visit every home in town once every 10 years. In addition to that, we're required to do a follow-up inspection anytime a building permit is pulled. So the assessors are contracting Stacy Dunn of Wheeler Appraisal Services to help with these cyclical inspections. These will be conducted during the month of June on Daniels Road, Kimball's Avenue, Meridian Street, Morgan Street, Redgewell Avenue, and Stage Hill Road. Interior and exterior inspections will take about 15 minutes, and they're only looking to verify the existing data on our property record cards. So if you have any questions, feel free to call the Board of Assessors or the Select Board's office. We can direct you to the appropriate individual. Terry, who I believe that I saw when I came in there, she is our assessor, is here. All right. I also wanted to bring to the board's attention, I'll be forwarded a letter of commendation that was just circulated by Chief Kevin DiNapoli in regards to Deputy Chief Lucantoni. The Wenham Police Chief was just reaccredited as an accredited police department with the in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This is really a big deal. It's, it shows that our police department has adopted and implemented industry best practices, both in standard operating procedures and policies. And it's not only that they've adopted these policies, but that they implement them and, most importantly, follow them. So it's an annual audit that goes on that reviews all these policies, makes suggestions for additions and changes, and goes through records to ensure these policies are being followed, both in arrest records, if you're being pulled over, record retention, call requests, response times. So it really goes down the list. It's a tedious and time-consuming process, and Lucantoni heads that process up every year. And to their credit, the Wenham Police Department was just reaccredited this year. Finally, we have the Pride flag raising. That'll be June 1st at 6:30 at Wenham Town Hall. So please join the Wenham Human Rights Committee and the Hamilton Human Rights Committee to celebrate and honor Pride Month. And that is all I have for you this evening.
And one more reminder that we do have an election coming up on June 16th, correct? Thursday. I don't see Diane here.
Yes.
But we have 2 fine candidates running for the open seat on the select board, so encourage everyone to come out and show them their support. Okay, we'll keep saying that until we get to June 16th. Okay, with that, just a couple notes on the agenda tonight. We do have a National Grid poll hearing scheduled for 7 o'clock, so we'll pause where we are in the agenda at that time to take the poll hearing. And we are fortunate to have an update from the airport, which will take place at 7:15. Okay, so we'll try to work around that. First on the agenda, we have the consent agenda, which is one item, which I believe there was an error when we first
Yep.
appointed Patrick last meeting, I believe it was. So we're basically just correcting, I think, the dates. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was a through date. We had the incorrect term date. The correct term is June 30th, 2029.
For a 3-year term?
Yep.
Okay.
So I move to approve items A as printed in this evening's consent agenda.
Second?
Thank you. All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Peter, yes.
And I.
Opposed? Okay. Consent agenda is passed. Okay, we have next item B, requests for exemptions under general law, chapter 26, put my glasses on, 268A, section 19B1 for the following individuals: Bonnie Anderson, Mimi McDonald, and Michael Reed.
My understanding, as of a few minutes ago, Bonnie Anderson has not turned in her request yet. So we're going to have to limit the discussion to Mimi McDonald and Michael Reed. And Joe, can you fill in?
Yeah, so this is just a similar petition that was before you a couple months ago. Essentially, there's 2 applications for the Historic District Commission. Smaller applications, one is for garden shed, another is for window replacement. But these members actually are within the abutters zone. So per council, we were instructed probably the cleanest thing to do is just to say that they have a financial interest because they're essentially abutters, and they have a financial interest, but they can get waivers signed off by the select board in order to participate for the next meeting that's scheduled for a week from tonight. They were down 1 seat, so it's hard to get a quorum as it is. So we're hoping to get at least 2 members with the waiver, so they can vote next week.
Sounds good. Any questions on that?
I'm wondering if there anybody, any of the abutters or the 169, the residents of 169, if they have any objections to those folks voting?
I have not heard any objections yet on my end. Yeah.
So I would appreciate a motion for the 2 individuals to handle that.
Okay, I move to grant exemptions under general law, chapter 268A, section 19B1 for Mimi McDonald, Michael Reed, so that they can participate in voting for the Historic District Commission for an application from the residents at 169 Main Street.
I'll second.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Ben, any questions? Okay. We'll have a vote. Finn?
Finn votes aye.
Ben?
Ben, aye.
Deirdre, yes?
Peter, yes.
Okay. Motion passes. Okay, 15 minutes. We take Longfellow Road?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay.
Joe, can you bring up that?
So what item is that?
We'll move to item E. Discussion and potential vote to update to the Longfellow Road parcel terms of sale to include a requirement that the new buyer dissolve any easement rights associated with the parcel.
You just scroll to the, thank you. So I've sent a couple emails on this, but the extent of it is the select board, several meetings ago, voted to dispose of this parcel. It's an undevelopable parcel up on Longfellow Road, and I had to cancel the auction because some information became available to me earlier in the week. The auction was supposed to be on Thursday. I think I became aware of it on Monday or Tuesday. So I canceled the auction because we can't, by law, change the terms of sale within the advertising period, which is 2 weeks prior to the auction date. So Michelle, if you can just jump to the second page of this. If you look at the top here and the bold, the paragraph at the top, essentially what this is telling us is that there are easements rights that are associated with this parcel. And back when this section of land was originally subdivided, it was divided into, dozens of these little rectangles. And lots 107, 108, and then 100, 101, 102, 103, and 106 now form two parcels that have been, these little parcels have been merged into two tax parcels, one of which has a home built on it. And this is a section of town that has a significant amount of abutter encroachment, easement issues, property line disputes. So the idea was to try to clean this section up as far as delineation of property lines. So when I was made aware of this, we canceled the auction. We're going to repost the auction, but these terms of sales make the buyer of the parcel aware that when they take possession, they have to dissolve these easement rights. So here we just need the select board to vote on this language here.
All right, it looked fine to me. Any questions, comments from the board? All set? The motion?
Move to accept the new language as presented to us tonight for the Longfellow Road parcel terms of sale agreement.
Second.
Okay. Any further questions? Finn?
None, thank you.
All right, let's vote. Peter?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Finn?
Aye.
And Deirdre, yes. Okay, that is passed.
Through G or I.
Is the chief on?
No, I'm just going to give an
Oh, you're
overview.
gonna,
Yeah.
okay.
So the memo was sent by the chief. We've been working with the finance committee. However, no, we don't have an outcome yet, but I did want to, where the request had been circulated, I did want to bring it to the board's attention and, give a little context to it. So last couple of years have really been unprecedented times in the Wenham Police Department. We've had, a permanent disability. We've had a couple military deployments, which is new. We've had a number, I think 3 or 4 long-term injuries. Some on the job, some not, but serious enough that they were unable to work, and with short-term disability and disability through all these situations, we've had to pay overtime to backfill the vacancies. So the overtime line item has grown exponentially. It also makes it difficult to predict, because when we're looking ahead and trying to model what the overtime will look like when you're fully staffed, it's hard to build in these vacancies. But the chief has 2 very qualified candidates. The idea is that he needs 1 to become fully staffed. 2 could reduce the overtime, which is forced in creating, the morale over there is tough right now because there's a lot of forced overtime. So it's, some overtime is good, but when, you get a call and say, I know you got your kids, whatever, on Thursday, you got to come in and work a 12-hour shift. It isn't very receptive. So we're trying to look at, ways to accommodate that, and also understanding that 10 years ago, when Chief DiNapoli came on the force, I think we had about 20 or 22 part-time officers that filled these overtime needs, and now we have 3. So what used to be an overtime opportunity was a straight rate of pay for a part-time officer at about $30 or $35 an hour is now an overtime, a forced fill overtime for a full-time officer at about $70 an hour. So, looking at the option of hiring an additional patrol officer, creating some schedule flexibility, and, in theory, it's, you're filling a full-time officer straight pay in a situation that you'd be paying time and a half for. But this, is not a cost savings. It would be probably budget neutral if our assumptions are accurate. And it would, come with, increased morale at the department, better rested officers, more full-time officers in the field, meaning that, what was a part-time officer that works maybe one shift a month or one shift every other month, that same shift would be filled with a trained and certified police officer that works part-time and works full-time and is fully trained. So is that some of the discussions we're hoping to have, the outcome from the finance discussion, to have a more comprehensive view on the finances. But I just wanted to get that in front of the select board, so the discussion's going on.
So we're going to let you play the finance game out, right?
That's correct.
But I mean, what I saw, and this made sense to me, but low morale is not a good issue, and having tired police officers is even dangerous. So.
Yeah, I mean, that is the argument, or part of it, for sure. It's just a balancing of, how accurate our assumptions, and, we're going to experience some turnover next year in some other departments, and these budgets are set, so there's really no wiggle room to mess it up, so to speak. So we're just looking at it closely, and we'll report back when we have those financial figures.
Ben?
So those financial figures sound like will include, once it comes back to us, Steve, some projections on the amount saved in overtime, the amount saved in, I guess, academy costs against the increased expenses for the position. And because you said the hope is it might be budget neutral, but that's what's being fleshed out now.
Yeah. I definitely don't want to sell this as a cost savings. I mean, what we have highlighted, which is alarming, is that we're significantly under budget next year for overtime.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a cure to that. This is just to shift over to money already being expended on overtime to full-time. It's not going to be a one-to-one match. You can't take, not every hour of overtime is going to be able to be filled with straight time. But the idea is of it enough, of a fixed schedule, because, 40 hours every week will fill enough that it offsets, in a budget neutral sense, a budget that's already probably under budgeted, and we're going to be looking for some sort of a transfer to alleviate that next year.
I don't think the arguments that he's making here are strong. I think I'm waiting for the financial analysis and in the consideration, as you said, not just to this year's budget, but kind of moving forward. Once we have that, I think we can make a more informed decision.
Thank you.
Yeah, agreed. In principle, I would support this 100%, but given how close we were to an override this year and how little wiggle room there is in the budget, let alone in the out years, what we could be looking at, I think it does come down to the numbers.
Agreed.
So, to be continued. All right, we have about 6 minutes. Can we do the 1A update?
Yeah, I think we could.
Okay. All right, so we will move to item H, update on the Route 1A traffic light project, including projected timelines and steps required to complete the takings process that was authorized at town meeting.
Yep. All right, so the first page, I'll go through quick. You've seen this timeline before, but this just shows how long this project in the different steps of the way, they initially started in 2008. And here we are in, December 30th, 2025, and, we're still not to the construction phase yet. So, we're now probably going to be into 26, definitely through 26 into 27 before any shovels get into the ground. All right, next slide. So basically, kind of where things stand since that, December of 25, the end of December 25, working into town meeting. So we got the 100% design schematics as identified in the prior slide. That identified a number of, a couple small takings that the town gave to the state for part of the project. They identified several temporary construction easements that needed to be taken for the project to be completed that required a town meeting vote. So, we found out that back in February of 26, certified letters of intent were mailed to all the taxpayers that were affected. We conducted meetings with each one of those residents, a number of meetings from March to May of 26. Town meeting in April voted to approve the right-of-way acquisitions, which was another piece. We had all these are statutorily required. And then finally we had to, once town meeting approved it, we were able to hire an appraiser and have certified appraisals done of each temporary easement. And the total compensation amounted to $17,450 across, I think, 7 or 8 temporary easements. So written offers went out on May 20th. There is a 30-day review period for the individuals that were affected. We will be coming back to you on June 23rd, which is your second meeting in June, and the board will be asked to vote to approve these orders of takings. I can say that, all meetings were very receptive to the process, supportive of the project. We don't anticipate any problems. The process has been going, knock on wood, from that standpoint, very, very smoothly. And then once that's in place, we can record these at the Registry of Deeds, and the full right-of-way package, they call it, will be submitted to the Mass DOT so that they can compile all the documents and send them out for bid, which is, roughly targeted for the end of the summer, early fall. And then they're looking at to award it probably in December of 26, and then construction would start in spring of 27. And this is the one I was surprised with because I've been giving a very low time estimate of 7 to 9 months. However, the project is anticipated, we found out this morning, to last 2 to 3 years because it will be construction will be suspended during the winter. So only from, I believe it was end of October through March or April each year, the project will be suspended. So it's basically like 2.5, 6 month.
Is this really going to disrupt the flow of traffic right here for 2.5 years?
I think the idea is that it's incremental changes so that it's not, they don't vacate for 6 months. It would be, they would complete a phase and traffic would flow normally. But I do anticipate, it's a pretty big project. I do anticipate there's going to be some traffic flow impact. I'm not sure if there's a way around it.
I think I'd be pretty disappointed if it's 2.5 years of cones and
Yeah.
orange bollards here in the center of our town.
Yeah, no, and I don't believe that that's going to be the case. I'll confirm, but they do this. They're pretty good. Essex just had a DOT replace the bridge on 133, and although it did take about 3 years, the traffic impact was relatively seamless, given the extent of the project. So I do have high hopes, but I think that's maybe in part why it's such a lengthy process, because they have to minimize the impact to traffic and not just tear everything up and go to town.
Yeah, it sounds like they pack up for a period of time each year, but that was a surprise.
Yes.
I will admit,
Surprise.
not at all what I thought you were going to say. Okay, question?
Do you think, have they provided or will they provide a little bit more detail on phasing in terms of It'd be good to know more about
Yeah, I'm sure I
what's
can get that
happening
more.
when and where, and, you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're there yet.
Yeah.
Once the final schematics go out to bid and they get the contractor's schedule, because they did caution us when they were saying that, because we were like 2 to 3 years, and they're like, well, you gotta understand that these contractors have a number of jobs going on. So they might complete a section and then it might be idle, even outside of the winter for, a month or so.
Yeah.
As they kind of, move the equipment around and resources. So, but yeah, we will certainly continue to update the
Yeah.
board.
But regardless, it will not start before spring 27.
Yeah, they said
So-
because,
We have time for
They-
updates.
yeah, they can't start in the winter time because of, well, obviously the winter, but snow removal impacts, paving can't really be done in the winter, inclement weather, the salt, like there's all sorts of stuff that goes on during the winter that is not conducive to road work.
Okay. Any last questions? All right, thank you. Appreciate the update. All right, it's 6:59. It's going to take me a good minute to read this. So I'm going to start now. All right, this is a long one, so bear with me. Put the glasses on. Okay, the Select Board of the Town of Wenham, Massachusetts will hold a public hearing to consider a petition by Massachusetts Electric Company doing business as National Grid and Verizon New England Incorporated of 1101 Turnpike Street, North Andover, Massachusetts. They request permission to locate poles, wires, and fixtures, including the necessary sustaining and protecting fixtures, along and across the following public way. Eaton Road, National Grid to relocate, I guess that's one JO pole on Eaton Road, beginning at a point approximately 110 feet south of the center line of the intersection of Eaton Road and Cherry Street, and continuing approximately 30 feet in a southern direction. The proposed relocation of PI 128, or pole 128, and installation of an anchor form, proposed pole 128, Wenham, Mass. And to construct a line of underground electric conduits, including the necessary sustaining and protecting fixtures under and across the public way or ways by Eaton Road, again, National Grid to install underground facilities on Eaton Road, beginning at a point approximately 140 feet south of the center line of the intersection of Eaton Road and Cherry Street, and continuing approximately, I'm not sure what that is, 10 feet in an eastern direction. The proposed installation of customer underground service plus or minus 10 feet from 175 Cherry Street to the proposed pole 128, Wenham, Mass.
And I think we
Okay.
have John Jenkins here from National Grid.
Yes, thank you. So can you explain that to us, please?
Yep. So my name is John Jenkins. I'm a design engineer from National Grid. And this work is per customer request at 175 Cherry Street. The current pole, which I'm not sure why it was printed out weird, pole 1128, is in the way of their driveway. And so they request that we move it approximately 25 to 30 feet south of where it is. This actually benefits us in a way because the customer at 13 Eaton Road will have their service span shortened. And our facilities don't continue to Cherry Street, so we'll be able to remove everything from that pole once we relocate it. And then the underground is for the customer at 175 Cherry Street, who will be going underground to the new pole if it's relocated. And one thing that should be noted is that the two lots, 16 Eaton Road and 175 Cherry Street, have been combined. I guess it hasn't gone through like the town property map yet. I was told it takes a while, but he sent in the sheet to me saying that like, it got stamped for approval. So that will be one lot that's going through.
Okay, our assessor is nodding, so
Yeah.
that's good.
And just
Okay,
for
so-
clarification to the public, the reason why it takes a while is because the Master Law requires us to reflect its condition as of a certain date. So we can't update this, because it has to do with legal assessed owners until July 1st of each fiscal year.
Okay.
You want a motion?
Well, no, not yet.
Okay.
Questions from the board first?
What kind of notification requirements have you fulfilled? Have you what do you have to speak to? Who do you have to speak to for abutters? And have you heard from them?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say for the abutters, we have a list which gets sent out, which was attached to the, I think it's the page below this one.
and I actually worked with the assessor, which I normally do for these type of projects. We actually have a more comprehensive list. So I think we used 300 feet within the site, so it ended up being about 75 residents received notifications, and it's at least a 7-day notice, 7 calendar days. So those went out, and we also put it on the public notice page on the town website and on the bulletin board at Town Hall, which was what state law requires.
And then I know I also spoke to the customer to the homeowner at 13 Eaton Road, and he was all right with it. I'd seen him when I was out there marking for the new pole, and he didn't have a problem.
Good.
And of the 30-odd people who received notices, no objections.
I have not received anything back from anyone. Yep.
All right, I'll just ask if there's anyone here who wishes to comment on the poll hearing. Anyone here? Nope. No one on Zoom?
No one on Zoom.
Okay. I think we're good. I just did want to note the paperwork is addressed to the Board of Selectmen. If you could have that corrected in National Grid's records. We are not the Board of Selectmen, we are the Select Board.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, you ready?
You ready to do it?
Sure thing.
Here we go. I move for relocation of one JO pole on Eaton Road, beginning at a point approximately 110 feet south of the center line of the intersection of Eaton Road and Cherry Street, and continuing approximately 30 feet in a southern direction. The proposed relocation of pole 128 and installation of an anchor form proposed for pole 128. Wenham, Mass., and to construct a line of underground electric conduits, including the necessary sustaining and protecting fixtures under and across the public way or ways by Eaton Road. National Grid to install underground facilities on Eaton Road, beginning at a point approximately 140 feet south of the center line of the intersection of Eaton Road and Cherry Street, and continuing approximately 10 feet in an eastern direction. The proposed installation of customer underground services plus or minus 10 feet from 175 Cherry Street to the proposed pole 128 in Wenham, Mass.
Second.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll move to vote. Finn?
Finn votes aye.
Ben?
Ben, aye.
Peter?
Yes.
And Deirdre, yes. Okay, thank you very
Thanks, Sean.
much to National Grid.
Thanks.
Okay, so the next one, I don't think we need to wait till 7:15, but we're very pleased this evening to have an update from our Beverly Regional Airport Manager, hopefully I say your name correctly, Gabriel Hannafin. Good. On the current activities at the Beverly Airport, and I just wanted to thank Peter, who attended the event hosted by our Representative Hannah Bowen a couple of weeks ago, connected with Gabriel and suggested that we have him here. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. I'll try not to take too much of your time tonight. I have with me Kyle Ritalik. He's the chairman of the Airport Commission. So just kind of a basic overview of Beverly Regional Airport. We are a general aviation reliever airport. Essentially means that we exist to take non-commercial traffic away from your commercial airport. So Boston Logan is so congested with all the airline traffic, lots of schedules to meet. It's important to have surrounding airports to take the smaller, slower private aircraft so that Boston Logan can run smoothly. So that's kind of our primary role at Beverly Regional Airport. There's about 460 acres of land, 31, give or take, acres are in Wenham. For those 31 acres, we do pay a property tax to town of Wenham for our acreage that falls in Wenham. In 2025, we had 67,600 operations. An operation is a takeoff or a landing. So that's, operations are kind of the way we gauge how busy an airport is. I have a little bit more information on the next slide about the operations. We have about 110 based aircraft at the airport. So 110 aircraft call Beverly Airport home. I think all but 3 of those are single engine aircraft, just small 4-seater single engine aircraft. And then a couple jets, small jets, are based at Beverly, and then some helicopters as well. In 2019, MassDOT did an economic impact study for all of the airports in Massachusetts. They found that Beverly Airport's impact to the region was roughly $34 million. Again, that's 2019, a little bit outdated. I do know MassDOT is in the middle of going through another one of those studies, so hopefully in the next year or two we have a new updated number of what our impact is to the region. So kind of going back to operations, in 2025, which is this point here, we had 67,000 operations. I have good historical data on operations back to 1962. That's what's graphed out in black on here. So we, in the 70s, Beverly Airport was doing over 200,000 operations. You see, since then, it's kind of been an overall downward trend in our operations number. In 2020, this is true across the board, not unique to Beverly. In 2020 and the years immediately following it, there was a mini boom, per se, in general aviation activity. And we see that reflected in our operation numbers. 2024 numbers were at 93,000 operations. And then we saw a big drop, about a 25% drop in operations from 2024 to 2025. I've also graphed on here this red line. Every so often, we do a master plan. As part of the master plan, we have to do a forecast of what it's believed the operations and aviation activity will look like at Beverly 3 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out, 30 years out. And so that's what's graphed with that red line. That was last done in 2019. And so I have that on there to show that that big spike in operations was really the outlier in this major drop in operations that we saw in 2025 and we continue to see in 2026, kind of a downward trend, is more a correction to where we should be and not necessarily any negative sign on the airport. Just that aviation, that mini boom that happened post 2020 is kind of slowing down a little bit. And then this is the breakdown of operations by aircraft type. So 90% of all operations in 2025 were single engine aircraft. I can tell you anecdotally that the vast majority of those single engine aircraft operations were flight schools. We have 2 flight schools based at Beverly, so they're constantly flying, training new pilots. And so the vast majority of our operations can be attributed to them and those single engine planes. The next largest share was jet traffic at just about 6.5%. of all operations in 2025 were jets. That is slowly growing, those operation numbers of jets slowly growing at Beverly. And then the remaining operation breakdown was kind of scattered between helicopters and multi-engine propeller planes. So noise, 2025, we tracking all the noise complaints that we received. I received a total of 233 total noise complaints from 36 separate individuals. There's the breakdown. Wenham specifically, I heard from 5 Wenham residents in all of 2025. And then kind of the last bullet, 4 complainants made up 175, or 3/4 of the total reports filed. So we get, in 2025, we got a lot of noise complaints, but from a relatively small grouping of individuals. 2026, the next slide is kind of the same trend. We're trending to receive more noise complaints than we did in 2025. We've already received 123 total complaints, and only from 7 individuals, 5 in Danvers and 2 Wenham residents. One complainant, who does happen to be a resident of Wenham, accounts for 87%, or 107 of those noise complaints that we've received year to date in 2026. Touching on,
Gabe,
yeah,
so I've seen this before. I think the funny thing is,
yeah.
it's not the jets that people complain about.
Correct, yeah, thank you for reminding me. That is important to touch on. The breakdown of complaints we receive, vast majority of them are about the single engine propeller aircraft. Mostly the flight school aircraft that are practicing takeoffs and landings. They take off and they never leave the area. They fly in a rectangular pattern at low altitude, right next to the airport. And so that's where most of our complaints come from, are those low-flying, propeller-driven aircraft. Jets tend to not bother people as much. They're quick. Jet engines anymore tend to be pretty quiet, and they're take off and they're there for a second and then gone. Whereas as it's often described to me, the droning of the smaller aircraft really bothers folks. So that's where most of our complaints come from.
Can I just ask, I can't resist, but it's a little bit odd that there are complaints from Gloucester and Hull.
Yes, yeah, so.
I'm just curious.
Great. Yeah, I can definitely explain those. So the one from Hull I know was a helicopter. So 2 of the news helicopters are based at Beverly.
Okay.
And so I forget what the news story was, but they had taken off from Beverly and they were in the Hull area just doing circles at low altitude for footage. And so the resident down there looked up where they came from, saw that they were based at Beverly, came from Beverly, and gave me a call. The Gloucester one was a flight school aircraft that was out in an area over Gloucester practicing maneuvers. So to get your license, you have to go out and do certain maneuvers and low altitude flights, circling, stalls. And so someone, same thing, saw this low-flying aircraft kind of circling their property and saw it came from Beverly and gave me a call.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
Yeah. So upcoming capital projects, right now, our life at the airport is really about getting the runway 1634 reconstructed. This is our main runway. It's 100 feet wide by 5,001 feet long. It's in need of a total reconstruction, taking up the existing pavement down to the base and then redoing everything on it. At the same time that we're doing this, we also plan to pave 300 feet of safety area on either end. Not to play too much inside baseball on this, but I want to reiterate that this is paved safety area. It's not runway. What that means is that this pavement can be used by aircraft for takeoff. They can taxi onto this pavement and start their takeoff roll at that pavement. What they cannot do is land on it. So the landing spot, the aiming point that pilots are using when they're approaching the airport will all stay the same. So what that means for Wenham specifically is that aircraft that you might see from time to time on approach, flying low, coming into landing at Beverly. After this project, even with the additional pavement being added, those glide paths, those slopes that you see those aircraft coming into will not change. They're all going to still be going to the exact same point on the runway. There's just going to be extra pavement on the other end of the runway for them that if something were to happen, they'd get a few extra 100 feet of safety area for rollout. This is an estimated $15 million project. Most of that funding, 90% of the funding, comes from the Federal Aviation Administration. The state kicks in 5%, and then we kick in a 5% local share at the airport. So in preparation for that, and hearing you all talk about the 1A project, beginning in 2006, and just now kind of coming around to it, I live that every day. This has been a project that's been talked about at the airport for decades, and we're finally starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel for it. But it requires a whole bunch of studies and environmental reviews and permitting, and just a lot of boxes to check and groundwork before we can actually put shovels in the ground. So right now, we're currently working through a single environmental impact report. I know the select board saw a couple months ago that the airport, we were working with MEPA on an extended environmental notification form. The select board, in conjunction with the Wenham Conservation Commission, submitted comments in relation to that form. We're now working through the environmental impact report connected to that, and within that will be how we our plans to mitigate and address some of those comments and other outstanding environmental impacts that this project will have, particularly in relation to the wetlands that are nearby the project area. We're also working through data collection and permitting. And then the next big project after this reconstruction is an extension.
So I had a question. So if I understand you right, you're saying you're adding 300 feet of, well, it's not exactly runway, but 300 feet further, and the pilots will be able to back all the way to the edge of that extra 300 feet to start their takeoff.
Correct.
So that's going to be the louder portion of their flight plan, right? They're not going to be landing with an engine at full speed. So
Correct.
They're going to be starting a lot closer to the edge of the property line for their takeoff roll. And I was wondering if you could also kind of describe what the timing is of this, because it doesn't sound like it'll be something that'll be done in just even a couple of months. So when will that be happening? Because I wonder how that affects your complaint rate or expectations.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that affects it. Timing-wise, we're looking at 2028, summer of 2028 likely being when construction will begin. Right now, we're going through the permitting, data collection, and that single environmental impact report. 2027 will mostly be spent in engineering and design, and then 2028, we're hoping to begin the construction. Yes, the aircraft will be able to begin their takeoff roll now 300 feet closer to property line than they have in the past. I don't know if I've ever received a noise complaint about that portion of a flight. What I do receive most of my complaints about are aircraft right after they've taken off. This is when they're low, they're slow, and they're at full throttle, and that creates a lot of noise falling downward onto homes. And so what this 300 feet does do also is that ensures that with that takeoff roll starting earlier, that means the aircraft can get off the ground earlier, which means that once they're in the air, their relative height over homes by the time they get there will be that much higher, thanks to that extra ground roll distance that they'll have.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then the next major project after 1634 is reconstructed is an extension of Taxiway Echo. I'll have a picture so this makes a little bit more sense too. We're kind of planning that for 2030, but that could get pushed back. It will not happen before 2030. Estimated $7 million total project cost. As part of this project, our environmental assessment and this single environmental impact report is also taking that project into account as well. We kind of killed two birds with one stone with that, with both the runway and taxiway project. There is a portion of this project that will require some land acquisition. And it's really interesting. There's a little, like, 1/5 of an acre of land that this new taxiway kind of dips and touches a little bit, so we need to acquire that 1/5 of an acre parcel. It is in Wenham. We just don't know who the owner is. It is an odd piece of land that years and years ago, it got subdivided. We don't know if it was an old farm and it was like a corner of it that just got cut off and parcels subdivided. No one seems to be able to find any owner of this small piece of land. We just know it's not the airport. And so that's a fun little mini project and land acquisition that we have to get to the bottom to for this taxiway Echo extension, which does relate to you guys in Wenham. So the next slide, I think, is just a picture. I'll step over here. So when I talk about extending the taxiway, I'm talking about this taxiway. We want to extend that all the way down to the end of that runway. Right now, if anyone wants to use that runway and they're starting over here, they have to cross that active runway. The safest thing would be for them to not be crossing an active runway. So that kind of dictates our need to extend that taxiway all the way up. And then that is the runway that the extra 300 feet of safety area is going on either end. So 300 feet here, and then 300 feet up there in the Wenham portion of our property. Yeah.
So if the taxiway extension goes through, which I realize will be after the 300-foot extension, it would loop over to the runway itself?
Yes, yeah. So it'll go up and then make it like 90-degree turn and connect to the end of that
The new 300
yeah, feet.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I had another question
Yeah.
about the without naming any names, the Wenham resident who has filed 107 complaints this year, which is, I think, it's been about 150 days, I think, in the year so far. I'm assuming that's either in a butter or a near neighbor to the airport.
They live, I can tell you exactly, 1.45 miles away from the airport.
So they're not
They're not a direct abutter.
Okay. Yes, there's a keen interest in.
Yeah, they
what is
just
going on.
happen to live. I mentioned briefly the traffic patterns that like our flight students use. So, like, take off and create a big box in the air. this resident happens to live directly under where one of those flight paths
I see.
is and making that box. And so they do see frequently aircraft flying relatively low near their residence. And I think next slide, just for your information, is my contact info, Commissioner Retalic's contact info. And then Airport Commission does meet on the second Monday of every month at 6 p.m. Public meeting. You all are more than welcome to come anytime. Any resident who's interested in the goings-on of Beverly Airport, we love to have residents there as well. So if you're able, highly encourage coming and seeing us at Airport Commission meetings.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That was very interesting and informative. I will say, I'm very close to the airport myself. I think in a butter to in a butter. I do understand the concerns from the residents because particularly the altitude, sometimes I've been unnerved by how close they actually come to some of the rooftops.
Right.
So I do, I can understand
Of course,
the concern.
yeah. And we are also very understanding of that. We know we've walked down like Old Burley Street all the way down to Maple, and when we were walking there were aircraft that were coming overhead that even us, two aviation nerds, were like, oh my goodness, that is loud, that's low. So, we've experienced, we do recognize that. I should say that in my role as airport manager, my authority is extremely limited. I say the moment aircraft wheels leave the ground, my authority ceases. The federal government owns the skies. And so I cannot legally tell someone that they can't fly a certain area or a certain time. I can just make very, very strong recommendations. I'm constantly communicating to our tenants and users of the airport. We do have a voluntary noise abatement program. Most of them do a really good job of abiding by those recommendations, but we do every once in a while get one that blows through altitude and very noisy. So we do understand.
Yeah, that's helpful to understand, actually. Are there any more questions from the board? I just wanted to put one note out there for future discussion. We are hoping to try to get some grant funding to do sidewalk work in town. So one of the streets that's currently lacking sidewalk is actually Burley Street.
Yes.
So we may be in touch at some point. I don't know which side of the street we would end up looking at, but there is potential. I hope that we will get to the point of putting a sidewalk. But also there's definitely some significant overgrowth outside the fence line.
Yeah.
And it tends to trap the trash in that area. So if possible, I'd like to discuss that at a later point.
Absolutely. Yeah, those trees are on an overgrowth is something I have also noticed, and I don't want to step too much out of my lane into Airport Commission territory, but I do think that you could find a lot of support from airport administration and anything that we can with a sidewalk.
Okay, great.
I feel like there's been a disconnect over the past decades between the airport and Wenham and Danvers and Beverly, and there just hasn't been that cohesive relationship. And Gabe and I have been on for, it'll be 3 years in June, and we've just really been pushing to reach out to walk the streets, talk to the residents, come to select board meetings, really try to be involved with the communities and select boards and city council, and just try to mend those bridges and try to fix as much as we possibly can, because we kind of came in handed a pretty bad hand. So we're doing our best to try to fix all that. So anything you guys need or questions or anything like that, we really want to make sure that we're there for you. And for the public, if you have complaints, please file them. From day one, we've implemented a data collection process and just really try to get the numbers and get the data so we can come to people and select boards and say, this is how many people are complaining, how many complaints, what's happening, how many jets, how many single engines, and have all that data at the ready. We have spreadsheets constantly going between us all, and it's been great to be able to bring this information to select boards, city council, and the public, so.
Great, thank you very much. We
Yes,
appreciate
thank
that
you.
approach. That was a good summary of the past.
Great.
But thank you for your efforts.
Of course, yep, thank you.
All right, thanks very much.
Have a good one.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to F. Our town administrator will provide an update from the 24 Cherry Street Working Group regarding the progress to date, current status, and next steps toward reaching a mutually agreeable resolution. So,
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, as you said, we concluded our, I believe it was second working group meeting last week, and I believe and feel it was productive. And up here you see essentially 7 issues or items that we've identified along the way of both concerns of the select board and concerns of the residents, and have tried to work through them to come up with a mutually agreeable outcome. So I believe really outside of number 4, which is buffering, landscaping, and building placement, and we have some outstanding information that we're trying to source for the encroachment at 26 Cherry Street. And 7, the no build, where essentially on, I think, similar pages, not in 100% agreement on everything, but pretty close. One being the affordability component. I believe the select board is still in favor as prioritizing 3 affordable units, but understanding that the economics of that just may not work, and it's just not feasible to have 3 affordable units. And I believe the residents are more supportive of 1 affordable unit and 2 market rate units as their number 1 priority. So some outstanding discussions that will come before the select board for further discussion. We're not in a position to discuss them right now. Some of these are going to require, and we've started drafting, I know Margaret has come up with a very comprehensive and extensive list for EOHLC for the permitting process, and kind of where, and part of that is around the site plan review. I know there's some questions that were raised in the regulations, whether site plan review applies here. However, DCAM does seem to think that it does, but we do want to get clarification on that based on some interpretations of the current draft regulations that are published. We also, the select board will be asked to make a recommendation, either rent versus own. Also, potentially looking at sizing of the structure and bedroom restrictions, multiple structure. We've also gotten some questions that we're working with our internal staff, and will turn outside if needed, but permeability versus percolability of the soil, whether it's an aquifer zone, and also coordinating with public safety for, does that lot suffice as, and as far as land area goes for proper public safety access and turnaround ability of their apparatus. So those are, kind of the outstanding issues that we're continuing to discuss. We're going to continue to meet and hopefully get EOHLC to weigh in on some of the outstanding questions that we have.
great, thank you. Then Finn, yeah.
Great, if I could just add, just to pick up on a few points that Steve made, starting with the site plan review issue. So as Steve alluded to, there's some room for interpretation in the draft regulations, and Margaret's working with the state on that. I think there seems to be a general consensus, though, within the working group, inclusive of the neighborhood representatives on that working group, that we would strive to, whether it's in the form of citing to Wenham site plan review regulations, or trying to embed the same protections that are in site plan review around abutter impacts as part of criteria or restrictions in a development agreement, that whichever vehicle is used, I think the consensus is that we share the objective of making sure that those protections are in there to the extent that, that they can be. So that's something that I'm working on as well, and I'll coordinate with you, Margaret, on, making sure that we've covered the landscape, including on issues of, if there are any overlay districts and so on that come into play that might, trigger some of those types of protections. And then on rent versus own, when we had the working group meeting with the representative from DCAM, Joe Viola, I would just note that he seemed perfectly receptive to home ownership if that does end up being the preference that is put forward. He didn't really push back on that at all. So those are just two sort of things I wanted to amplify based on the discussions that we've had, including, as you noted, I think a very good discussion with the neighborhood group a week ago, this evening, I think.
Great, thank you. Finn, anything to add?
Just very interested in figuring out what kind of language we're going to be able to see out of DCAM, and how much weasel words there might be, so that the town can stay in control as much as possible after it's gone through. We've seen developers kind of disappear and not finish all of their obligations before, and I don't want to see that. And if we're going to put in anything like this, that might be up for interpretation, the site review, does that allow, does it look appropriate for the neighborhood? Is it appropriate for the site? Those sorts of things. I'd like that to be as strong as possible so we can stay in control. Thanks.
Good. Peter, any questions?
I would just, sorry, Ben. Are you guys happier now with the process?
Yeah, I'm going to turn to them next, but anything from you first?
Oh, sorry.
Jumping the gun.
Dave. Sorry.
Any questions from you? Okay. All right, I'm going to open it if anyone would like to comment, question.
I'll add something.
Okay.
Andrew Dillon, 30 Cherry Street. So I'm an abutter to the to an abutter. My family and I have lived in Wenham for 14 years. We love Cherry Street. We love our neighborhood. We love our neighbors. And this is going to significantly impact, from what I've read, the proposal, different options, both my property, but most importantly, my neighbors' properties. We have beautiful land here in Wenham, and to see it get developed into low-income housing next to residential properties, I don't think is fair, and I don't think anyone in this room would want that to be next to them. So I'm a little disappointed.
Low-income housing is residential property.
Okay. Well, would you like to have 5 condos?
I think you've missed some of the developments that have occurred in the working group if you're still talking about 5 units, but
Okay.
keep going.
3? Would you like 3 next to your property? Would you like all the trees taken down?
Okay, so I'd rather you not pepper the board with
That's
questions,
fair.
but
I
please.
just want you to know that it is going to impact our neighborhood significantly, and I'm here to support my neighbors. My request is respectfully, if I could be added to any notifications. I've received 1 letter in the mail to date on what is transpiring, and I would love to be notified. Again, 30 Cherry Street, Andrew Dillon. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Yes, we can certainly add you to the contact list. And I'll just note, I live across from Maplewoods, 45 units, trees did come down and so forth, but honestly, it has not disrupted the neighborhood, I would have to say. I'm not as close to it. No, it's a point of reference. I'm not trying to argue, I'm merely stating.
Sliver of land.
Yes, I understand.
A lot of housing now.
When you moved to your house, was the Department of Mental Health group home there at the time?
It was.
Okay.
I wasn't aware of it.
Oh, okay.
I sold the property,
Hmm.
but yes, it was there,
Cool.
which was concerning as well.
Right.
Once I found out about it.
We're not dismissing your concerns. That's why we have, in fact, instituted this working group to work together with the neighborhood to try to come to a mutually agreeable endpoint. I'm still optimistic that we can get there. It sounds like we've made a lot of great progress. I'm just merely stating that, yes, I do understand it is also in my neighborhood. Multi-unit housing was added. It has not disrupted me. It is a different layout, to be sure. It's just a comment. Would you like to?
Yes, Lisa Bile, 25 Monument Street. I would like to request, and then there might be other members in the group who feel the same way, that a feasibility study be done on the lot, because it does fall in what's called an ADOP, an aquifer protection. I get the acronym wrong, but it is an aquifer protection zone. So because of that, some of the regulations change, and namely would be permeability. I think generally permeability around here is like not to exceed 50% of the lot. In the aquifer zone, its permeability cannot exceed, impermeability, I'm sorry, cannot exceed 20% of the lot. So, you know, you've got potentially a long driveway, you've got rooftops, foundations. Depending on fire truck access, you might need to have a turnaround, which requires more, you know, impervious surfacing. So that's an issue. I appreciate that you spoke with somebody in the Board of Health about the septic. I cannot imagine that that lot can support 12 to 15 bedrooms. I would like to know why my parcel couldn't get a 5-bedroom septic. So septic's an issue, impermeability is an issue. I think a feasibility study is reasonable to ask. This board has been receptive, especially with regard to the survey of 26 Monument, Cherry, to understand the boundaries. I think that, you know, you'd want to investigate some of these other issues. This may never get off the ground. And if you're concerned about a potential developer, you know, being fully aware of what he or she might be getting into, they might appreciate understanding what that law can support.
Thank you. I think, Steve, you mentioned that calculation needs to be done. Is that correct? Did I hear you correctly?
We are looking into it to the extent that a feasibility study would cost funds. We're not ready to go that far. And I also believe that, you know, and part of it is the due diligence of the developer, right? So if they're buying it assuming that this is going to meet the permeability requirements at 3 units, and they get it and it can only be 1, right? That's what they're going to have to build. They can't circumvent these rules, you know, because there was no feasibility done there. It's part of their due diligence.
Steve, could you tell us the status of the survey that, and whether or not that those funds have been used, or has it been scheduled?
Yeah, it's going to cost the full $5,000, and they're hopefully going to get started the end of this week, early next week.
Thank you.
Just with respect to the feasibility study, I think that the work that is taking place now and will take place over the next few weeks in terms of, you know, trying to get, as part of this RFP, the maximum protections that are available under our bylaws, whether again it's site plan review, citations, or as development agreement. That's going to, I think, and Steve just alluded to it, go a long way towards figuring out what the contours, basically what the developable land is going to be, what, you know, what can and can't be developed there in compliance with those standards. And so that's, I think that lays the groundwork for feasibility study. And I think, you know, I'd like to sort of to take it step by step and see where that brings us. I do agree with Steve that, you know, in general, it's going to be a part of the due diligence of the bidders to to do a feasibility study, because they'll know, for example, if what you're, in terms of the aquifer protection district or other things that might be in place, they're gonna know what they can build there and whether they can make a profit on it, as 1, 2, or 3 units.
I'm David Hunt, 21 Cherry Street. I think we're making progress. The list there, we talked about a couple times. I think from my perspective and maybe our perspective, I think just staying in the loop and continuing the conversations. I think the pedal to the metal to be done by Memorial Day, and with all these outstanding issues, and I don't think we've seen kind of the priorities from the select board yet, in terms of what's the number 1 priority, what's the number 2 priority. So when they're grading proposals, how they're going to be analyzed. I think that a 5-unit all affordable versus 3 units all market rate, how you guys and DCAM would look at that and kind of compare those two. I think that's something that we still need to flush out. But other than that, I think we appreciate, Ben Phineas joining the working group and the select board and Steve kind of working through this stuff, because I think a lot of it is a significant improvement from where we were 4 weeks ago. So, thanks.
2 weeks ago.
I think if I'm understanding this correctly, the point number 1 there, the select board supports 3 units, is kind of where we're at the moment, right? I think we are past the 5-unit discussion.
Yes.
Largely.
I think the consensus and certainly emerged from the last select board meeting was just as you say, 3 units, with the greatest number of those units being affordable as is feasible. And as Steve said, it may be that, given the economics, that maybe only 1 will be affordable. Moderate income, 80% AMI, for example.
One of the things that I noticed was kind of new for me since our last meeting was the second point there with the comment there in italics, right? And even the conversation with DCAM, I think we batted around the $300,000 number. But this is really only if they go full affordable. And so, the $300,000 that the AHT has been putting up is really dependent on them actually delivering. So I would hate to see, for instance, offering $300,000 because that's what, the bidder agrees to on day 1 when they take ownership, and then they can only fit 2 and still think they're going to get $200,000. I don't want those weasel words in there, right? So I want this stuff to be clear.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's definitely going to be clear. We've been clear that it's $100,000 per unit, so that will be, unless the Affordable Housing Trust changes their stance, our interpretation has been 100 per unit. So if it's 2 units, it's 200. If it's 1 unit, it's 100.
Mm-hmm.
Sir?
Good evening. My name's Greg Hepner. I live at 19 Monument Street. I'm a direct abutter to the property. Couple things. One, I'm generally pleased with the way the working group has been received and cooperating with the Board of Select with the town of Wenham. I think we're going in the right direction. But I want to reiterate and maybe reemphasize something that Lisa Biles said, and I'm worried about the septic system too. That property is in the overlay district for the aquifer, and if I understand the aquifer protection correctly, it's to prevent overdevelopment and overconcentration of effluent coming from a septic system. I'm happy that we're down to 3 bedrooms per unit and 3 units for the property, but that still leaves 9 bedrooms on the property. And if you max out a potential scenario, that's 18 people living on that property. And when you think about the intensity of the black and brown and gray water use, that could be a severe concentration of pollutants to our drinking water. I'm interested in what's happening above the ground, but this is our drinking water. And one of the town wells, I believe, is on Pleasant Street, not that far from this property. I don't know if we understand where the aquifer flows to and from. but I'm concerned that 9 bedrooms and 18 people on that property could have a very adverse effect to our drinking water. And once that's polluted, I don't know how you get it back. So I don't have a recommendation, but I would like to see how else we could study that, to see if there's a better way we could understand what 9 bedrooms and up to 18 people living on that piece of property could mean to our public drinking water system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Brian Constellazio, 22 Archery, just a direct abutter. Just a couple of questions. Again, I think too that we've made some good progress and appreciate your input to help us kind of understand these terms and these conditions that, you know, we're all getting up to speed on. But we've talked a lot about, you know, it's the builder's responsibility to do the due diligence, which I can, you know, accept that, I understand that. But can you explain a little bit more about what happens if they do go forward, you know, kind of to Finn's point, with a proposal, and we've got the RFP drafted, but we don't have the answers to these questions, like what Greg was requesting or what Lisa's requesting for, you know, feasibility studies for the lot, and then it can't be built, and then it's kind of just a spiral. It almost seems like the cart's before the horse here. Like, is it the select board's responsibility to present the property in such a way that this is what can be built based on some known criteria, or is it really the process that we just kind of wing it? Because it just kind of feels a little too uncertain. Like, for a bidder to come forward and put something together, it just doesn't feel concrete enough to me, but maybe I'm missing the process of how that works. So maybe you could just explain a little bit more about how that could work.
I can take a crack at that. No, it's a great question. I mean, typically, site plan review, which is in front of the Wenham Planning Board, deals with those kinds of issues, requires the kinds of reports that you're talking about and that Mr. Hepner referenced. This is why we're working so hard to figure out as these regulations are evolving, because there's not really a track record yet under the Affordable Homes Act and the Disposition of Surplus Land program, which is what this is, to figure out precisely how that will work, whether it will be traditional site plan review in front of the planning board, or if not, how we take those same standards and embed them into a development agreement that would require the same types of reports, analyses, and so on. So it's important that everyone is raising and flagging these issues. It's been really helpful because that helps us prioritize them and flagging them to the state, and also to try to come up with the most robust RFP that we can that you know, seeks to ensure that type of review. I hope that's helpful.
So just a follow-up question. So we go through this process and whatnot. We try to get to this point, but is that in to try to avoid, you know, having a failed RFP, that someone couldn't build what we kind of end up as for the language? And also, and if that's the case, then I guess that's good. But if it falls apart and then something can't happen there, is that kind of the point where the state just pivots and says all bets are out, like nothing happens to the property, or what happens at that point?
I think it's going to be important to have sort of that rigor at 2 stages. So one at the RFP stage, to really make it as specific and you know, not overly prescriptive, but at least, you know, explicit in the protections that we would want to have, so that hopefully that conveys to the bidders, like, you know, submit a proposal that actually does address these issues. So that's sort of phase 1. And then phase 2 is sort of the enforcement phase. So if it's in front of the planning board, then you have a whole, you know, set of planning board, planning department, whose job it is to, you know, is to make sure that in the implementation and that process, that as the development is taking shape, that the reports, the analyses, and so on are actually meeting those standards and not just kind of slipping through the cracks. I mean, obviously, no project is perfect, and we can't predict what kind of what development proposal is going to come forward. But that's at least how we're trying to tackle it, is to you know, have as robust a set of conditions on the front, and then robust enforcement of those, either through a development agreement, which would have clear enforcement mechanisms written into it, or through traditional site plan review, which is the planning board role.
And so as this evolves and we figure out what can be built, if that's evolved from multiple affordable units to something way less robust, a single family, a two families, something like this, is that still going to be supported by the select board? Is that the shape that it has to take at that point based on the facts? Is that a possibility?
Well, I think the scenario you're envisioning seems to me to be one where the basics of the RFP that we're talking about, which is 3 units, that was not economically feasible. So that probably means that there's some other RFP that gets, put out there that maybe eventually it's an RFP for a single family house. It's hard to know.
Gotcha. And I don't certainly want to paint a picture
process.
that's, a false pretense. It's just, if the septic perk comes back and it's not what can support 9 bedrooms, and the setbacks in the aquifer zone and all these things, whatever, the turnaround, that you can't put a driveway past 100, 150 feet without a turnaround if you can't get the setbacks because they have to follow town bylaws, right? If that can't happen, then there is a path forward to do something different with the property based on a different RFP. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I mean, the state ultimately holds the reins on that, right? They're the owner, so they could.
Unless it's transferred. I mean, my experience, I've seen, not here, but I've seen projects come forward where they want to put, X amount of units or a certain project there, and they find out they bought the property, and they get in there and they realize that, they can't do it, or there's some issue with the land that doesn't make it feasible, or they can't do it, and then they end up, with site plan review, kind of rejiggering the project. So if it's, they were trying to get 3 units there, and they got to take it for a loss, but obviously they got to recoup some of their money, so they put 1 unit there and sell it. You know what I mean? But they're in the site plan review process.
They're also buying this property for $1, right?
Well, that depends on, right, so that's going to be part of the state will have to say what they're willing. They were certainly willing to sell it for $1 with 3 units. I think they're going to have to, they're going to have to figure out at what point they're willing to part with it for $1, or, any sort of sliding, reduction in sale price based on affordable units.
Is there any path forward to have a little bit more further communication with Joe Viola to kind of lay out that scenario, to say what if? Like, what if this, because it seems like we're just at the beginning process of figuring out what this land can support and what this lot can support. And without doing a full feasibility study and putting the money behind that and the time and all that kind of stuff, if there's a way to figure out, just from talking with Board of Health or whatever, just to figure out what can be done, a better study about the aquifer, and lay that scenario out to Joe Viola to say, okay, now what? Because everybody was kind of focusing on this, but if this isn't accurate, then I think it's just a lot of wasted time for everybody. And, we're kind of asking the wrong questions, and we're barking up the wrong tree to get answers for, screening and all this kind of stuff. It's what if none of that applies? What if it's a totally different scenario? I guess I'm just trying to understand the process better here about who's happy with moving forward kind of with blinders on, as opposed to, like, let's get the facts and figure out what this thing can support.
I mean, my feeling on that point is, we're in the process of moving from sort of concepts to getting more meat on the bones in relation to the things we're talking about. It seems to me that's going to be a more productive conversation probably with Joe Viola, is once there's a draft RFP that lays out some of that detail. Because you could say, well, okay, well, what if the Aquifer Protection District prohibits this, then what? So I think he'll be able to hopefully answer those kinds of questions less in the abstract, once we keep marching down the road of trying to get more specificity built into this.
Okay. 2 different theories of arriving at the same point, I think. Okay.
I hope so, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Isabel, 25 Monument Street. So just to follow up on the feasibility study, so the board is willing to do the survey of 24 and 26 Cherry to understand what we're dealing with, but we may not be willing to do a feasibility study to address some real doozies. Is that where we are?
I think we're taking.
I'm sorry, not to diminish the hurdles. I understand.
We're not ready to outlay, another significant sum right now to fund a feasibility study. We may never be ready to make that kind of outlay. We're trying to take it step by step. The survey issue was something that I think we felt was important to be able to nail down as part of this menu of issues. And then as we work on the other things on the menu, I think it gets us much closer to having a feasibility analysis. But I think it would be a waste of money right now to just, like, we're not going to do it, to hire a consultant and say, do a feasibility study, and just sort of throw that onto the agenda right now. But I think we're all heading generally in the same direction to understand feasibility issues, but I certainly wouldn't support funding a feasibility study right now myself.
Okay, because there are ways that a developer could appeal to certain divisions within the town to get certain requirements waived. I want to be very careful that those appeals aren't granted. I would prefer to have a report on file saying X and Y cannot be done, and have that binding upon Board of Health.
I don't see it. A consultant's feasibility study wouldn't be binding on any of those boards. Anyway, I understand you want to get as much, insight into those issues as possible.
All right.
So just, how are we gonna deal with this moving forward? Like, I think people are, want to be in the loop. The working group, are we gonna have monthly meetings instead of hashing out here? How are we gonna deal with it moving forward? Because I think the motion was just to establish it and get it done by Memorial Day. So we want it on record for, how we're gonna be informed moving forward.
Well, I'm working on the outstanding items. When we have an update that is substantive enough to pull together another working group meeting, I'll respond to that group email.
Perfect.
And we are still waiting on the 4. I don't think, now that the resident group is growing, we still need to have, the formation of the committee needs 4 people. So right now it's just been everybody's participating, but if it's going to continue to get larger and larger, we're going to need those 4 individuals to be identified, and then all communication will go through them.
Okay. All set for now? All right. Thank you all for being here again, and for everyone's participation in the working group with the time and effort that has been put in by staff, board members, and the neighborhood. We appreciate all of your efforts. All right, with that, we have 2 more items on the agenda. So we will take item I, discussion on board committee and committee appointment policy, along with a review of the open and vacant seats.
Just pull up the overview.
Okay, it's that time of year again.
Yep. And do you have the ones that are vacant? And
these are all the ones.
oh, so these are vacant?
Well, most of them are terms that are being held now that will be vacant till August. The cultural council usually has 3 or 4 alternates.
Okay. So I guess these are the ones that are, some of these are filled. Do we know roughly how many have incumbents in the seat? That are currently seated and will be vacant, or how many that are currently vacant and we're still looking for?
I can get that.
Okay. All right, so
Most of these are.
we'll send out an email updating, and we're putting together a website update and kind of an advertisement to recruit folks to get involved, and we'll identify, because sometimes people are hesitant to come out and volunteer if there's a potential that they could unseat even though the term is up, that they could unseat an individual who's already been serving on the committee for a length of time. So tomorrow we'll be posting that information, along with, an encouraging statement to get folks to get involved. They will have 2 weeks, which will align us with the next select board meeting 2 weeks from now, the second Tuesday in June. That will be the first meeting that the select board will review the candidates, if we have any at that time. We'll also be doing our annual appointments for special employees, police officers, firefighters, things that, certain positions that require an annual appointment by the select board. And then in our final meeting in June, the fourth Tuesday in June, the select board will review the final interested candidates again. So it will be anybody who is currently in the seat and wishes, in term is expiring and wishes to continue on. They need to submit interest just like they did the first time, and the select board will review all open seats and all interested parties equally, and any support that the board would like to give the select board in an advisory capacity has to be made in a public meeting and has to have a vote of the committee in support of the individual or the advisory message that it would like to deliver to the board.
Okay, so we will distinguish the list, I think, for our purposes on what is currently vacant. For example, there is, I know, a vacant position on the Finance and Advisory Committee, and I believe also on the Human Rights Committee. So I think, so that those of us on the board can also encourage people that we know in town to consider volunteering for those that are vacant.
What are our posting requirements, and whether or not these are going to be something we can highlight in, say, local newspaper? Might get a little more eyeballs.
That might be nice.
Too bad Hamilton News wasn't here.
Not to put anyone on the spot. Yes, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think, the importance is, is following that policy, because it's one uniform approach to all appointing, which before it's been kind of piecemeal up until this point. So I think we have a good system now going forward. We just have to stick to it.
Yes, which is to say it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion that people will just automatically be reappointed. They do need to reapply, and other people are welcome to also apply for those vacancies that are from the end of someone's term. So to try to make it fair across the board, everyone gets considered at the same time. But with that said, we do have some pre-existing vacancies that may need some additional recruitment efforts. Any questions, comments?
Nope, thank you.
And I would like at some point to look at right-sizing one or two of these. I do think that the Cultural Commission, where is it? Cultural Council, excuse me, which tends to perpetually have a lot of vacant seats. I think it is actually because we have a council of 22 seats, 11 per town, which is the maximum allowed by the Massachusetts Cultural Council, and probably not the appropriate size for two towns that are the size that we are, which is on the smaller end of the spectrum. So I would like to look into how we could reduce the number of seats so that we do not perpetually have vacant seats to sort of an appropriate level across the two towns.
That makes a lot of sense.
I'm just putting that out there.
11 per pound, that's crazy.
That's a lot. That's a lot. Okay, that was my observation. All right. With that, we just have J, discussion on proposed amendment. I guess it's really a revision to the select board onboarding, not so much a policy, but more of a resource. So I want to thank Diane Bucco, who also happened to be working on this at the same time I was working on it, which actually worked out very well. So I took where she was on the document and added my changes to it. So that is what you see before you tonight. So tonight I just wanted to introduce it briefly, and then everyone can have an opportunity to go through it in more detail and make any comments or suggestions, and we'll vote it at the next meeting. So it's not a tremendous change, but it's sort of updating, streamlining, adding a few points of information, trying to reduce some redundancies. If you could scroll to the table of contents, Michelle. So this basically is intended to serve two purposes. One is to clearly help to onboard and orient new select board members, but my goal is to also have it on the website so that anyone who is interested in running for select board knows in advance, has access to the resources, the body of knowledge, can do their due diligence on understanding the roles and responsibilities of the board, but also sort of understanding what the expectations are, what our meeting cycle is, and so forth and so on, so that it is all laid out for anyone who is interested in running for a seat. So it is fairly basic. I guess one of the questions I have, there was in this version a select board code of conduct, which was, I think, somewhat redundant to the code of conduct that is now incorporated into the employee handbook, which we updated a couple of years ago. So I tried to reduce the redundancy but not lose completely some of the points that are not fully covered. So I think that's one place. There's also potentially a slight redundancy between the last section, select board notes on best practices, and I renamed it behavioral expectations. So those two we may want to consolidate, so I would just ask you to look at that. I did not include the full town code of conduct in here. If you think that that's helpful as an appendix, we could do that. I just referenced it with a link to the employee manual. So that's just an overview of what we did, reformatted, added information, reduced redundancies was basically what happened. Any questions for this evening?
Do I have this?
Yes.
You have it now in the latest packet that was since
Okay,
2
great.
o'clock today.
Because of Deirdre's significant input, we left it out so that it was distributed to the board at the same time it was posted for public consumption.
Great.
So at our next meeting, we're gonna have it on the agenda to comment and vote.
Yes. Yep, so anything you'd like to see added or revised.
Okay.
And then hopefully it'll be at the point where we can vote it.
Should we wait to, if we have any suggested revisions, should we wait to voice those at the meeting, or should we send them to Steve?
Yeah, I was just thinking that. They can't send them to me, right,
You can send them to me, I'll compile.
Steve?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Finn is the newest member.
Yeah, I'll be,
Particularly helpful to hear what you think.
yeah, we'll be spending some time on that, and we'll
Okay,
get that back to Steve.
great.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, then we have reached the end of our agenda for this evening. We have, our next meeting is,
June 2nd?
No, it's the second week in June, the second Tuesday in June. So this is the 5-week month that will realign us with the first and
first
second
and-
Tuesday starting in July.
June 9th.
June 9th.
Yeah.
June 9th. So 2 meetings in June, which puts us back on the first and third Tuesdays for July. And I had mentioned to Steve the possibility of having 1 meeting in August and potentially taking 1 vacation meeting, essentially, unless anyone has objections to that.
Slacking already.
Or if Ben insists, we will.
I won't.
We'll be meeting every week.
We're gonna twist our arms and.
If Ben insists, we'll put that meeting right back in. Or if there are things that need to be addressed in late August, we will certainly add the meeting back in. At the moment, that was my thinking. not to take a month off, but to take one
That sounds good.
meeting off for the year.
Cheers.
All right, well, I'll move to adjourn at 8:17 PM.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 Yep.
Opposed?